Are you looking to improve your squat technique and hit new PRs? Well, these 5 tips I'm going to give you are going to optimize your squat so you can lift the most amount of weight possible, and then the most common issues that I see in lifters when it comes to the back squat. Let's get to it. Hey there, Brandon here from Thirst Gym, and today I'm going to give you my top 5 technique tips to improve your squat. To give you a quick background, at my best, I squatted 567 pounds at 132 pounds body weight raw, which is the former all-time world record, being the biggest squat in that weight class ever whenever I did it. Since then, I've really focused on trying to improve lifters' mechanics when it comes to the squat, whether you play sports or power lift, but these little nuanced things can immediately add pounds to your squat, letting you hit a new PR. So let's get into those 5 technique tips. All right, the first issue I see from a technical perspective when it comes to the squat is the breathing and bracing. Being able to create what's called intra-abdominal pressure. And what that means is that when we go to take our breath in, after we've set up our squat, we want to make sure that breath that we're taking is actually in our abdomen-based area. Now, we can breathe into our chest cavity, into the middle part of our cavity of our body, but the biggest issue that most people do is they do what's called chest breathing. So when they breathe in, they're elevating here to take that breath. And as you can see, my shoulders elevate when I take a breath like that. And when I take a breath like that, I'm actually extending through the middle part of my back. My chest is coming out and flared. That's not optimal with the way our rib cage and our diaphragm works to be able to stack and be able to make pressure. So the analogy I like to use is like a Coke can, is that we want to be rigid from top to bottom. And you know, if you put your foot on a Coke can and apply pressure, you have to put a lot of pressure to get that thing to break. You can actually put your foot on there in a good amount of pressure. But if you do it from a side perspective, it immediately crushes and breaks. So when it comes to our squat, we want those mechanics from an intra-abdominal pressure perspective to be strong from our pelvis to our rib cage and completely stacked. Doesn't mean we have to be overly posteriorly tilted here, but we also don't want to be overextended. And when we take that breath, breathe here, because now we have an open end of our scissors of our Coke can here towards the front. So a drill you can do to make sure you focus on this well before you even get underneath the squat bar is put your hands around your side and then take your normal squat stance, and you're gonna take a big breath in through your nose and actually feel your hands move out towards your sides. And you can do the same thing from front to back, in through your nose. You should be able to feel it go forward and backwards. We want to be able to create a 360-degree expansion of that midsection. So the first big thing I want you to focus on is breathing here. Once you've got that brace or breath in, now we're actually going to brace, and we're actually going to use our abdominals to come down and create even more pressure to rigidize that midsection. So it's not just that breath in here, ribs are down, breathe in, hold, squeeze, feel your abdominals, create that pressure, and now we're able to squat. So in real time, what that's gonna look like, when I get underneath the barbell, the mistake that we see is after they walk out, lifters will take a breath and they'll go like this. If the bar is going up and down, that's a really shitty breathing and bracing. That tells me that you don't know how to do it. So if you're actually taking a quality breath in through your nose, brace, and then go down into your squat. You should feel very rigid from that perspective. And then what you're gonna find is that force transfer is gonna go up into the barbell, letting you lift more weight. All right, the second tip I'm gonna give you to improve your squat is focusing on your upper back tightness and how you have that bar set on your back. Regardless of whether you do high bar or low bar, setting your upper back is crucial to be able to pair that with the intra-abdominal pressure in that tight midsection that we just talked about. So when the barbell is going across your back, there's 2 cues here that I really like to use to help people understand what it's like to have a tight upper back when you squat. And the first one's going to be to break the bar over your back. Physically try to think about taking that barbell and just pulling it down like a lat pull down, extra tight across your back. Not only do we want to do that, but we want to make sure that our scapulars are pulled together and down, okay? It's not just squeezing them here, it's taking them and actually squeezing them together and down, which will activate our lats and our upper back just in general. And when we go to actually breathe and brace with that, now we have a completely stacked, strong unit from our pelvis all the way up into that barbell. There's no reason the barbell should ever move once we've got that tight upper back and that tight rigid midsection. The second cue that you can use as well is to actually squeeze the bar and actually bring your elbows down this way towards you forward and then in, okay? So not just breaking the bar and squeezing your shoulder blades. For most people, that will get the job done, but there's still people that still have an issue of understanding. You'll see that their elbows flare out this way. That's a very common way to know that somebody's back is not set or your back is not tight in the squat. So when I'm getting set on the bar here, I really wanna make sure that before I even unrack that bar, that my elbows are pulled down and I'm actually taking that bar and pulling myself into the bar, so to speak. So my lats right here are incredibly tight, like I'm doing that lat pull down on my back, and I can actually feel my upper back being tight and rigid here. Now your elbows can be back just a little bit. They don't have to be right underneath the barbell like this, so to speak. But what you don't want to have happen is when you actually go to hit your squat, your elbows come up like this and your back goes forward. That's gonna dump the barbell forward on your back, and you can see I'm in a really bad position. But if I'm squeezing that barbell hard, my elbows are pulled down into my side. Hopefully you can see the difference of how that bar sets. Now after I breathe and brace, boom, comes up good and strong. So not only is that creating a strong shelf, but we're gonna tie that rigidity into our midsection so that when it comes to actually squatting, the legs can transfer that force up into the barbell, and it's gonna keep you more upright and also prevent you from pitching forward or losing that barbell over your shoulders as you go to transition from the bottom of the squat. All right, the third fix here is gonna be improving your hip mobility and your ankle mobility, so being more mobile. Now, you don't have to be incredibly flexible and mobile to be able to squat, but you do wanna make sure you have adequate hip mobility and ankle mobility to be able to hit the depths that you need to hit, but also so that you can maintain the position that you need in the bottom of your squat, which where most people are gonna have issues. So the big issues are that people are very quad dominant or very toe dominant. So when they actually go down to squat here, their heels are actually kind of leaving the floor, or you're gonna find that their ankles will actually, and their feet will start to cave in, their knees will start to cave in, and they're not having enough hip mobility to be able to actually spread the floor, sit back, and keep full heel pressure as they go to do that squat. So by having enough hip internal and external rotation, that's going to be able to allow our body and our pelvis to get where we need to be as we're going to squat, to be able to keep a whole foot pressure in the bottom of that squat. So some of the things that you can do here are going to be hip flexor mobilizations before you get underneath the bar. You can do hamstring mobilizations before you get underneath the bar, and you can do different hip switch variations, all which will get your hip warmed up and improve your mobility before you actually get underneath the barbell. You can also do some ankle mobilizations, elevating your foot on a bench, for example, as another way to prepare your ankle complex when you actually go to squat. Now, when you actually get to the barbell, another thing you can do to immediately improve first is to do some front squats first. Having an anterior load will actually allow you to squat lower than you would if you didn't have that anterior load. And that can allow you to warm up before you actually then go into your back squat, to where you can again do the same thing, and it will prepare you to stay more vertical in your squat. The other thing you can do as well, once you've actually done some more up reps, is go down into the bottom here, sit here, hang out, and shift side to side, feeling your whole foot pressure, trying to really sit into that squat, feeling your whole foot as you're doing that, and you can rock your hips back and forth, trying to improve your depth as you go, and then you should be good to go from that perspective. And that's gonna help you work on those in ranges before you actually go to squat. Again, you don't have to overdo this, but just slightly improving your mobility can immediately improve your position down here in the bottom where we need to be, so that mobility is not going to make the squat very back dominant, because if you lack internal rotation, your body will generally use your low back to be able to help extend the barbell rather than actually using your posterior chain and your glutes to bring them forward. And again, Lifting heavy weights is all about being in the optimal position, especially when it comes to getting into the bottom and out of the bottom of your squat. All right, the fourth thing we're going to discuss about is going to be your knee tracking and how your feet are actually working with the floor to be able to optimize your position. So it's been a very common thing back and forth on social media now to argue whether your knees should track out, whether it should track in, knees come over the toes, should you sit back in your squat. This is all going to be argued probably to the end of time. Everybody is going to squat a little bit different based upon their biomechanics. If you have longer femurs, not me, your squat is naturally going to be a little bit more hinged back over because you're going to have a longer lever arm, so your body's going to naturally try to use its posterior chain to be able to do that. But if you're somebody like me and you have shorter femurs in comparison to your body, you're going to have more forward knee travel and you're going to be more upright, allowing you to optimize your quads and probably have a little bit better ankle mobility, and your squat's going to look more squatty. Neither are incorrect because it's all going to break down to your biomechanics. So take a look at how you're built. If you've got longer femurs, you are going to be hinged over more so than somebody with shorter femurs. That's just the way that it's going to work. Now, we can optimize this by what happens with our foot pressure first and foremost. No, your knees should not be doing this on the way down, or when you go to come up, they're super like this to be able to finish your squat. Everyone's gonna say that your knees coming in a little bit is your body using your adductors to perform hip extension, and they are correct. A little bit of knee valgus or caving is okay if it's controlled with what your feet are doing into the floor. If your foot is collapsing, so what I mean by that is when you squat down, and your feet actually collapse like this, you can actually see my foot. It actually hurts my knees to even freaking do that. If your foot is actually collapsing in, that's bad. You have bad foot pressure mechanics, your knees should not be coming in. Now, if you have a whole foot pressure to where your whole foot is flat, you're pushing the insides in and out, and you're not trying to round your foot, you're trying to take your foot and apply the pressure this way to spread the floor from the inside out, but you can still feel your big toe, basically your pinky toe and your heel. If you can feel that tripod position, as we call it, as you're going down into your squat, then everything is fine. Then yes, my knees can be slightly over my midfoot or my toe. I can be upright in this position, and when I go to apply pressure, my knees are not going to cave in drastically on the way up. Okay? It's also become more common that when people go down, they're trying to shoot their knees forward to be able to create a big rebound stretch effect. Now, some people may be able to optimize this, but more than likely it's not you. If you focus on your whole foot pressure, I'll show you here with the barbell. If you focus on your whole foot pressure as you go to do that squat, again, as I talked about, I'm pushing through. It's hard for me to see in my shoes, but I'm taking the middle part of my foot and applying pressure into the ground and pushing out. So I'm getting hip abduction, meaning like trying to drive my femurs out, but I'm actually pushing to the middle part of my feet. Then that allows me to be able to sit straight down into my squat and then drive back up out of my squat. And so what you'll find is that you'll stay in a better position. As I've talked about, this is all about positioning, but you're gonna have whole foot pressure, and having that medial foot pressure will then allow you to be able to create more force out of the ground, okay? So I'm not saying that you have to squat out like this, is that you definitely shouldn't, but at the same time, if your knees are coming in on the way down, or you're going down and you're seeing a big influx of your knees coming in and your foot pressure is collapsing, so your feet are actually falling in, you don't have optimal foot pressure. So focus on these things from a ground up perspective, and you'll immediately find that with your bracing and your upper back, all that force transfer is going to optimize your squat in a much better position, letting you lift more weight. All right, the fifth and final thing we got to talk about here is going to be your setup, but in particular your walkout of your setup. Without a proper walkout and getting set in ideal position and minimizing the amount of work you have to do to get the barbell out of the rack into position can set your squat up from the get-go, okay? It doesn't matter if we've got that tight upper back, the proper bracing, the proper hip mobility, and the proper foot mechanics from the ground and how we're driving through the floor. If we don't get set up in an ideal position, all that is not gonna matter because we're probably not gonna be in an ideal position to be able to perform the rest of the things, right? So the big cue that I like to use here when it comes to walking out the squat to get set is step, step, wiggle, wiggle. I got this from good friend Harry Selko. It definitely helped me throughout my years of competing, and it is flawless in terms of how it gets you set to squat. And so what you're gonna do is when you get underneath the barbell, you're gonna have your feet underneath your hips and you unrack the barbell after you've created all that tension, all that great stuff. You're just gonna, again, take one step back, another step back to line up with it. Wiggle is just gonna be adjusting your feet, one foot, then the other, and then you can rebreathe, reset, and go down into your squat. This works so well because, one, it minimizes the amount of steps you have to take. If you're taking multiple steps where you unrack the barbell and do all this stuff, you're wasting a lot of energy with what's probably going to be 90% plus on your back. So be very efficient, be very rudimentary about how you're actually getting into that position so that you can move as a unit. If the barbell's moving a lot, you're wasting a lot of energy that could have went into the barbell when it comes to actually standing up with that heavy weight. So the reason I like this, outside of making it simple, is because it is consistent. It's not hard to take one step back and another step back and then realign, and you should have enough room from your rack position. If my short legs can do it, you can certainly do it. So in real time, we're going to get our barbell set across our back, hips underneath us. Again, big breath in through our nose, set our lats, set our back, stand up, take my step, wiggle my feet, create my foot pressures. Now if I need to rebreathe, now I'm going to do that in through my nose, brace down, squat, and then back up, and then come back into the rack. So you can tell that by being that methodical, if you train like that and you practice like that, when you go to actually do it, when it actually matters on a platform or for a PR attempt, it's going to just be automatic, and it's going to save you a ton of time and effort in terms of being able just to actually do the squat. And so I think this is a big issue that a lot of people don't necessarily see as an issue. They think, oh, I'm just getting the barbell into position. But how you treat that barbell mentally from the second you walk underneath it to how you treat it when you walk out is going to then transfer into how you actually squat it once we do all those other things that I talked about with the upper back tightness, the bracing and the abdominal pressure, your hip mobility, and your foot pressure. All those combined will set you up to hit a squat PR. All right, now that we've gone over those technical things of what you can improve, how do we go about implementing these into our training and then focusing on what to improve if we happen to have more than one issue? So I'm going to tackle the latter first, and that's if you have more than one issue, pick one that you can consistently improve upon, the things that give you the biggest return on your investment. For most people that I've worked with and coached, it's usually the breathing and bracing is number one. Either breathing and bracing either sucks or they don't know how to do it well. And by just doing that, everything else trickles down the chain in terms of what happens in terms of hip mobility, stability, your back gets naturally a little bit tighter, your foot pressures improve. Generally, there's a triple effect. If your breathing and bracing is pretty good, then it usually comes down to your upper back tightness. People don't think about how to break that bar over their back and press their scapulas, keep their elbows in and down. And then if you don't move very well, then obviously attack your hip mobility during your warm-up. You can really kind of do this just in general, but do these on your off days so you can improve your hip mobility quicker. Hey, that's me, that's something I need to do. And finally, your foot pressures. If everything else seems pretty good, focus on your foot pressures and how your foot feels on the floor, even during goblet squats or if you're doing hack squats. Notice what your feet are doing those pressures, not just pushing to the floor, but how you're pushing to the floor to the middle and then create that spread, and that will create more rigidity up the chain and then allow you to lift more weight. Now, when it comes to the programming and implementation side, the first cue and thing I'm going to recommend is do it every single rep. Every single rep from the bar all the way up into your working weights, or if you're taking a PR attempt, you've got to get the repetition. You've built in thousands of bad movement patterns, and so we now have to rewire how you think and how your body is going to come down into these new mechanics to be able to optimize what you're doing. And so you're going to have to get a lot of practice of doing this to where it becomes basically second nature of just where you're naturally doing it. But to do that, you've got to start with the barbell and get those quote unquote free practice reps as you're warming up every single day that you train. The second thing I recommend is slightly increasing your training frequency, but only doing it through dynamic effort method. And even if you hate the conjugate system, hear me out here real quick. The advantage that you have with the dynamic effort method is that you get a lot of sets with low reps, which means you get a lot of practice reps walking the bar out, setting it up, setting your brace, setting your back, applying your foot pressures, and then re-racking the weight. You don't get that when you do 3 sets of 8 versus 12 sets of 2. You're gonna get 12 setups versus 3 setups, okay? Yes, you may be able to handle more load and you feel like you're working harder and building more muscle, but if we're talking from a technical perspective, something that I believe truly helped me be a very technical squatter was doing the dynamic effort method week in and week out for years on end. I got to practice my setup, my walkout, all the technical aspects of my squat 12 to 10 times every single week on one day, which was more than a lot of people got through an entire week when you factor in your actual working sets. Not saying you have to use the bands and the chains and actually technically do the quote unquote dynamic effort work, but if you're taking 40 to 60% of your 1 rep max and you're getting multiple attempts and practices with that, that's going to begin to rewire in your brain and build that secondhand nature of how you can improve your squat. You can certainly just add another day and do some light work, RP5, RP6, sets of 2 or 3. That would also work, but you're gonna want a high number of sets and a low effort of work in terms of load, because the goal is not to lift the amount of weight, the goal is to get quality repetitions practicing your squat. So there you have it. There are my 5 fixes that immediately help you improve your squat from a technical perspective. You should be able to go on and hit new PRs and lift more weights than you ever have if you really take those 5 tips seriously. We also talked about how you can implement them into your training, into your programming, and immediately see actionable steps that was going to accelerate your ability to fix those technical things to really clean up your squat. If you happen to like today's video, took one awesome thing away that helped your squat, do me a favor, hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, share with a friend. That all really helps me out. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you at the next video.